Hey kids, we're here with Teo Skinsnes. He's the president of Stomvi-USA. He's also a designer of mouthpieces and a student of acoustic science as it pertains to our trumpet world. So we're going to have a little talk with him and try and find out some of the cool things that he knows about our trumpet world. What I love about trumpet players is we like to become, I guess, stuck on parameters, stuck on numbers, stuck on shapes, whatever it is. We're stuck on something. Instead of like getting in the car and adjusting the seat for where we want it, we want to know exactly the distance from the pedal to the seat. It's almost like we're reverse engineering what is the most logical thing to do, and that's try it, see if it works, and move on. But you hear trumpet players that are fixated on a shape of a rim, which that's a physical thing that touches your face. So I kind of, that's fine. But then they go into what throat size they have to have, or what type of backbore they have to have. And your reality is that if you change one of those parameters, you're changing the entire mouthpiece, and it's no longer the same mouthpiece. So can you maybe take kind of that ball and bat that around a little bit for us?
Mouthpiece design is like we spoke about trumpet design. There's one way to do it, which is a lot easier nowadays, is you buy a CAD program like AutoCAD or Mastercam or something that's set up, and you buy a CNC machine, and you learn how to use the CAD program, which is relatively easy, and you draw these designs and shapes that look really cool, and you send it to the machine, and it spits this mouthpiece out of the machine, and you try it. Oh, that's pretty good. Oh, no, that's not good. You put it on the side. Oh, that's good. No, that's not good. You put it on the side. Well, eventually even a blind squirrel catches a nut, right? And so I call that the Sorry.
I wish we had some animation for the blind squirrel finally catching the nut.
So you can do that shotgun approach where you just try this, try this, try this, try this, try this. It's real easy.
Eventually one of the products
something works. So my definition of it's the same whether it's a trumpet designer or a mouthpiece designer, but let's use mouthpieces as an example. A mouthpiece designer is not somebody who has a model here or a model here that works for a few people. It's someone who has a broad expanse of mouthpieces that all have similar sounds / playing characteristics and cover the bases from classical to commercial player. That's a good mouthpiece designer. Now, there are some mouthpiece lines out there that have that. I'm not a particular fan of their sound. They're a consistent sound, but some of them aren't very resonant to me. But that's personal choice. I'm sure there's some people that don't like the sound of our trumpets and mouthpieces, though I can't imagine why. But I'm sure there are. But that's so that's what mouthpiece designing is. There was I was at an ITG conference, and I don't remember the name of the company. I actually do, but I'm not going to say it. But there's a mouthpiece company, and they came up to me, and they said, yeah, they're talking to me, and they said, we're working with this famous trumpet player, and he's playing one of our mouthpieces now. And I said, oh, that's great. And they said, yeah, we had to make 100 mouthpieces before we found one that he really liked. Boy, I was thinking to myself, 100 mouthpieces, I would have stopped after 3. I mean, if I can't find a mouthpiece for someone seriously after 3, I can't find a mouthpiece for that guy. That's certainly, that example is certainly get enough monkeys typing on keyboards long enough and you get Shakespeare, right? That story to me is not anything about design. I don't want to work that way. I'm an inquisitive guy. When someone comes in, I don't want to waste their time. I want to get to a trumpet or a mouthpiece for them or both as soon as we can, so they can get busy on their way having the rest of their life. Here's a mouthpiece that we cut in half. So you got the rim. We all know what the rim is. You got the cup. We all know what the cup is. Then you have what I call the throat, which is the approach to the bore. The bore is the narrowest part of the mouthpiece. You know, a lot of us as trumpet players call the bore the throat, but the throat's another part of the mouthpiece to me. It's the approach to the bore. The bore is the narrowest part. Then you have the back bore, which flares out from there. Then you have the overall length of the mouthpiece, how long it is. And then, of course, you have the shank size or diameter, you know, which affects where the gap is in the instrument. Well, all those parts go together. They all go together. That's why I'm not a fan of screw back bores, because you've got the top and you've got the screw back bore, and let's just talk about the bore. They both have a hole in them. The cup, the top, has a hole in it. And if I put a different back bore on, in my world, that hole might want to change. Might stay the same, but it might want to change.
So you're saying the bore might need to change with the different back bore?
Yeah, it might to have it play the way you want it to play. Sure, or the bore in the back. You know, that bore may change with the back bore. So what infuriates people like John and other trumpet players are the fact that I don't want to call my number 5 a 5 back bore. I call it a 5 series, or the J6 is a J6 series, because although I'm using the same backbore tool or tools for the number 5, for example, in a big, large orchestral cup, other things change along with it. I don't just change the backbore. The bore of the mouthpiece needs to change as the cup volume changes.
And I got to jump in here because you haven't said the magic words yet.
What's the magic word?
Well, I'm going to hopefully... Why do you do that? What are you trying to achieve when you... instead of just screwing a different backbore on?
So it's all about intonation to me.
Okay.
When the mouthpiece is... And the intonation of the mouthpiece is not just related to the gap. You have to have these other parameters correct. So here's a good example. We'll go back to Carol Purviance. And if this teaches a mouthpiece maker something out there, a mouthpiece maker out there something they don't know, you should know this. He's starting from a successful mouthpiece. This mouthpiece is successful at the cup depth that it is. And some guy comes in, is old school, and says, I want a deeper cup. So he takes this successful mouthpiece and he makes the cup deeper. It didn't play so good. So he discovered that if he made the cup deeper and he made the hole bigger, it started to play better again. So from the post-game analysis, if you will, what he did when he made the cup deeper, he lowered the resonance frequency. He took water out of the cup, out of the Coke bottle, and when you make the bore larger, that can raise the resonance frequency up a little bit. Now this is very, very simple, and it's not. There's other things involved, but this is very simple, basic mouthpiece analysis. So what he was doing was he was taking this successful mouthpiece and he was maintaining sort of a constant resonance frequency across the line.
Right, okay.
So there's an example where you change the cup, and making the bore larger was an important part of making it play better. Now, there's other ways you can do it. You can adjust the back bore. You can go with overall length. So you've got all these parameters. You've got not only cup depth, but you've got cup shape, which when you get into mucky-muck acoustics, the shape of things makes a difference as to how it sounds. Think about tuned mufflers on cars. They're doing it by changing the shape. They're not just making the bore of the muffler larger or smaller, okay? So the shape of the cup becomes important. And that's part of the throat that I talked about, the approach to the bore. The bore is important because it has to balance everything else. The back bore is important because it has to balance with everything else. And it's sort of like spinning 5 plates at once to make a mouthpiece that's successful. Now, how do you balance all that stuff? I'm not going to tell any of our things we figured out, number 1. And number 2, some of it's just experience, you know?
There's a lot of guys out there that'll be like, if it's too stuffy, just open the throat.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do? I mean, I know it works for some guys, but why should you or should you not even bother doing that?
Well, Okay, so John's talking about, and it's very, very common. You get a mouthpiece. We're just talking about mouthpieces now, not trumpets. But you get a mouthpiece, and man, this thing's really stuffy. I'm going to make the bore bigger so I can get a lot more air through this thing. Well, as with all this stuff, it gets complicated really, really fast. But my advice to you would be, that would be the absolute last thing I would try before. It's the absolute last thing I would try. And the main reason is, whatever that mouthpiece is, you paid for it, you paid money for it. And as soon as you make that hole bigger, it ain't going smaller. It's possible, and I've done it, to plug the hole and re-drill it and reconstruct the part of the backboard, but who wants to go through that and who wants to spend the money on that? You're not going to do it. So I can tell you from my experience that about 8 times out of 10, making the bore larger on a mouthpiece makes it feel more stuffy, not less. So more back pressure, not less. It has to do with the way the sound wave is setting up. Hard to explain without graphs and stuff. But so let's talk about airflow in the trumpet and mouthpiece a little bit. As a trumpet player, it feels like I'm blowing a lot of air through that horn, especially when I was younger and before I learned a lot of these things. But the truth is, it takes about 5 seconds for the air in your mouth to reach the bell. About 5 seconds. The sound wave sets up like that in about 3.5 milliseconds. In the time it takes the air to get from your mouth to the world, to the end of the bell, that 5 seconds, the sound waves traveled about a mile. About a mile. So it turns out that the sound wave is the most important thing. There's a video on our YouTube channel, I believe it's called the Redirected Airflow Trumpet Mouthpiece.
Yeah.
And what I did was, I made this mouthpiece, and check out the channel, I'm not going to try to show you, but it's cut in half through the cup, and there's actually a membrane that stretches across the cup. That membrane prevents any air from your mouth from going into the trumpet. And there's an exit hole above the membrane. That's what this lets the air out the side. So it redirects the air. It comes out of your mouth, scoots out the side, doesn't go through the trumpet at all. But you can still play the trumpet using this mouthpiece, because what's happening is your lips are vibrating, they're opening and closing at the frequency they want, they're causing this membrane to vibrate, and that's causing the instrument to resonate at that frequency. There's no air from your mouth going through the trumpet. There's air in the instrument, sure, but it's not going through. And the amazing thing about this mouthpiece, even though you're basically blowing into a wall, this membrane, it doesn't really back up on you and feel like there's a lot of back pressure. The truth is, we're not putting that much air through the trumpet. And the sound aspect of it, the acoustic part of it, becomes more important. And that was the big paradigm shift, I think, that I went through with these flex mouthpieces, was designing them based on acoustics versus on resistance and airflow.